Polls begin closing in the U.S. presidential election. Trump wins key states of Florida, while Kamala Harris bags Massachusetts as well as Maryland. Battleground states remain too early to call.
Stocks in the United States rally ahead of the results of the U.S. presidential election, with major indices gaining over 1% each. The two-day Federal Reserve meeting also gets underway today. Stocks in Asia Pacific open largely higher, while the GIFT Nifty is suggesting a higher start for the Indian market.
Crude prices remain range-bound. Brent trades around $75 a barrel as prices remain range-bound ahead of results of the U.S. election. Gold prices trade marginally higher.
Titan reports a weak second quarter on lower demand in the solitaire segment and lower studded ratio. The management also cuts guidance on the EBITDA margin going ahead. Dr. Reddy's too sees a mixed second quarter profit and margins miss estimates, while India and emerging markets show strong growth.
The 11,300 crore rupee Swiggy IPO opens for subscription today. The company is eyeing a post-listing market cap of 87,300 crore rupees and has raised 5,085 crores from the anchor investors. Hello, good morning. I'm in the Mumbai News Center and I'm Vinny Motiwala. With me is Mangalam Malu. Mangalam, very good morning. Finally, we've been talking about that US election day and that result day has come today.
Result day has come today, but the question is whether we get the result today or not. We have the early trends. They are at the top of your screens right now. Road to 270 is what we're looking at. The early trends indicate Trump having 105 and Kamala Harris having 27. The most important part, however, are the battleground states. So far, it is as expected. The Republican states going Republican way, Democrat states going the Democrat way. The battleground states are something that we will watch out for. And it's finally the day everyone's been waiting for. It's election day in the United States. The world awaits to see whether the country will elect its first ever female president or whether former President Donald Trump will make a comeback. Parikshit also joins us early this morning to tell us where things stand. Parikshit, it's one of the closest elections going into the election so far. The early trends are in. What are you gathering?
Well, if you look at the national picture, the national average of polls, so to say, Kamala Harris only has a 0.1% lead. That's exactly how close this election is. And that's why everyone is saying it could take a few more hours and possibly even days to have a winner in case any person, any of the candidates challenges the election and the polling in any particular state. So where is Trump leading? Where is Kamala Harris leading as of now? No surprises yet. These are safe bastions, so to say, for both leaders. Trump is leading and is projected to win in Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, West Virginia, Florida. In Florida, he has been increasing his margin since 2016. Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Missouri, and Mississippi. Harris has been projected to win in Vermont, a safe seat for the Democrats, Massachusetts, Maryland as well. We're also seeing some allegations of fraud and cheating by Donald Trump in the key state of Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is considered one of the blue wall states for Democrats, such as Michigan, Wisconsin. And Democrats have usually won these three states if they have gone on to win the presidency. So you've got Donald Trump saying there's massive cheating in Philadelphia, massive cheating in Pennsylvania, but that has also been rejected by officials on the ground, saying that this is a case of disinformation and there is nothing like that happening on the ground. We have also seen delays in Wisconsin, Michigan and Georgia because there were several bomb threats that were received, but security officials cleared the locations. According to the FBI, the threats that they have seen, which has disrupted voting in some places, have emanated from Russian email domains. That's what the FBI has said. We had seen a record early voting. More than 85 million people had come out to vote early. And now we are witnessing election day voting. States like Michigan are seeing historic turnouts. Georgia is set to surpass the 2020 turnout as well. What we are seeing from the Trump camp are constant appeals to come out and vote in large numbers. Donald Trump tweeted some time back saying that stay in line, don't let them remove you, keep voting, keep voting. You had Elon Musk saying the cavalry is here, the men are coming out to vote in a big way. Because this election is so close, both sides need their supporters, need their voters, the undecided, the young Americans to come out and vote in big numbers, because the election is still way too close to call. You were absolutely right when you said that all boils down to those 7 swing states, and it's not the popular vote who will decide who wins this election. It will be the Electoral College. We are also seeing Kamala Harris tweeting to say that this election is a fight for the promise of America, for freedom, opportunity and equality for all. Let's see if the young American voter, the women, the Asian American, the immigrant can actually help Kamala Harris cross the finish line. Let me go across to Professor Mitchell Brown, who's joining us right now. Professor Brown, thank you very much for joining us this evening in America, this morning here in India. So far, no surprises. How do you think the counting has been? Your early thoughts?
Oh, thank you very much for having me. The numbers that we have seen come in from the states are exactly like we would expect them to be. The states that are reporting the Electoral College votes for Trump are the states that we would expect to see voting for Trump. And the few states that have come in for Harris are the states that we would expect to see for Harris. So far, it seems like a typical but exciting election day for the President of the United States here in America.
Yeah. Professor Brown, what do you see when you see Donald Trump, Elon Musk constantly tweeting, asking people to come out and vote in big numbers? Every hour they're saying 1 more hour to go, 2 more hours to go, few more minutes to go, come out and vote in big numbers. On the other hand, Kamala Harris, she's not tweeted anything for the last 8 to 9 hours. What does this show? Confidence in the Kamala Harris camp, or Donald Trump knowing that you need Republicans there, more Republicans need to come out to vote for him to win?
I think one of the things that's been clear looking at the trends of who voted early and what those numbers look like, there were a lot of women who voted early. There's a big expectation that there'll be a pretty significant gender gap this year. And so what we're seeing is the Trump campaign appealing to people who are his base, but also appealing to people who are maybe not typical voters or not typical Trump or Republican voters, saying, hey, now's the time. We need you to counter that. And so that's what you're seeing coming out of his campaign. And it very well could be an indication that they're a little bit nervous about what's about to happen.
I found Elon Musk's tweet interesting when he said the cavalry is here, the men are coming out to vote in big numbers. Do you feel that is conceding defeat, that there is a strong gender demarcation of this election and the women have come out in America to support Kamala Harris and the Democrats in a big way?
Yeah, absolutely. We typically have a gender gap in the United States where women tend to vote slightly more than men do, and they tend to vote Democrat, excuse me. And so part of what you're seeing the Trump campaign doing is saying, hey, fellas, come out and vote for me. And they're also really trying to appeal to men who typically aren't Republican voters, African-American men and Hispanic men.
Looking at the allegations of voter fraud, for example, Donald Trump said on his own social media network that there has been massive cheating in Pennsylvania. He's spoken about massive cheating in Philadelphia. Do you expect the Trump campaign to throw a challenge there? And in case a legal challenge is thrown, how could it make it difficult for the state to project a winner?
Yeah, what we expect him to do is exactly what he's been doing, which is sowing the seeds of doubt about integrity in the places where he really wants to get those votes, in those swing states where he thinks he really has a chance. And by ginning up his base to say already there's evidence, even if there's no evidence, that something's gone on, this is a precursor to the court challenges that he'll end up filing there. And he's trying to make sure he wins in the court of public opinion first. And it's a part of his strategy. We saw him do it before. He's doing it again now.
Nationally, we were looking at Real Clear Politics, and they said on a national average, Kamala Harris has a 0.1% lead, which means that no one is in the clear yet. She has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, she has to win Wisconsin, maybe Maine as well. What do you think is the path for victory for Kamala Harris right now, and by when do you think it may become clear?
Well, the path for her, what we refer to sometimes as the blue wall, she needs that blue wall, especially if she doesn't get Georgia, and especially if she doesn't get Pennsylvania. And I think both of those states are really unclear right now about what's going to happen. We're hearing reports of huge lines in Pennsylvania and some of the bigger cities that you would expect to see a lot of support for Harris. And so she has a couple of paths forward, and it's going to be very critical for her to concentrate on those states. And she has a big legal team too. And one of the things that you'll see happening is the legal team connected to her campaign saying, hey, we've got to keep the polls open longer. To the extent that we're seeing problems in polls, we want to extend voting hours. So we make sure everybody who should have the opportunity to vote actually is able to cast a vote who wants to. And part of the Democratic strategy then is going to be able to try and make sure as much of their base that's coming in late gets to be able to have their vote counted.
Right. Now, speaking about bomb threats, there have been bomb threat emails to certain states. And as a result, that disrupted voting, delayed voting in those states. Federal officials have gone on to say that this has emanated from Russia. These are Russian domains where the emails have come from. What does this show? Do you think America, the election machinery, was well prepared for any such threats and disruptions?
Yeah, election officials spend a lot of time preparing, engaging in what we call contingency planning. They have developed a series of really complex continuity of operation plans for how to handle a variety of crisis situations at the polls, including things like bomb threats. And what we've seen so far today is, particularly in Georgia, a series of these threats coming through, police investigating, getting the polling places cleared. And we are seeing in some places judges issuing orders to keep those polls open longer in order to make up for the time where there was a delay in people being allowed to vote because of them. It is a strategy that it's a version of a Russian strategy that we've been watching for the last 3 presidential election cycles, and that I would imagine will go on well into the future.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Mitchell-Brown, for joining us. Very interesting, and we hope we have a result. I hope the uncertainty regarding the election result doesn't continue over the next few days. It'll be a difficult time for the media around the world and, of course, in India as well. Thank you once again. We hope to have you again on our program here in CNBC TV 18. Back to you in the studios.
Right, Parishar, thanks a lot for that interesting conversation out there. Of course, we will keep an eye out on every little development that takes place in the US results so far. What we have, early leads coming in from a lot of the states as well. What we'll do is take a short break, come back on the other side. Adrian Mowat, investor at Hong Kong SAR, joins in to discuss the US elections, more importantly, its impact on markets worldwide and in India in particular. Welcome back. You're watching us here on Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. It is the fight for power in the US as well as we await US elections outcome. And as you can see at the top of our screens and the bottom of our screens as well, key updates coming in. Just ahead of that, we had the US markets, which ended mildly higher, but just for the results, the early leads that we have are from states which have predictable, voting patterns. The key would be what happens on the swing states itself. So we'll watch out for that. And if there is any sort of recalibration of those votes, then the final result would take some time. The most important question right now is what happens to everyone's portfolios, right? And how important the outcome of the US election would be for the equity markets worldwide and emerging markets as well. So let's get in Adrian Mowat, who joins us early this morning. Adrian, thank you so much for joining in. As we look at the road to the US power battles at White House right now, the important question, whether there is Trump or Kamala, or, it's a very close battle which will play out over a fair amount of time as well, as people are expecting it to. What could be the impact on equities world over, and in particular in India, because there are so many moving parts around, right?
Yeah, I think, if there's a Trump victory, initially US equities will do well. You're already seeing the dollar move a bit higher today on the back of some of the initial exit polls and some people looking at the trends at local levels. So I think initially you get a rally in the dollar, strong equities, weak bond markets. Then I think we move into the sort of muddle phase. I don't think Trump is good for emerging markets. I don't think he's broadly good for, a stable geopolitical environment. So in that he brings uncertainty, I think for risk assets, that's generally not a good thing. With regards to my comment on the bond market, as bond yields rise, that does tend to put pressure on emerging markets, pushes down their currencies, increases their funding costs. So that's how I see it at the moment. Trump initially, you get a move in US equity markets, you get a move in the currency, but medium term, I think it's probably less good for the emerging markets.
Hi, Adrian. Good morning. This is Vinny joining in the conversation as well. Obviously, medium term, a bit of a concern. And what are you watching out for? Because we do have those supply chain disruptions that could happen, or the tariff issues that could crop up as well if Trump comes into power. So how does that, how should we be viewing the Indian markets if that actually does happen and Trump comes in?
Yeah, so, Trump has had quite a good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. So India may be in a relatively better position. Clearly, if some of Trump's statements around tariffs against China are followed through on, again, that might help India in getting more manufacturing shifting towards India from China, which has been a trend that's been in place both under the Trump administration and under the Biden administration. You may be able to argue that that would accelerate, although let's not forget that if Trump goes ahead with tariffs on any import, that's also going to help impact imports from India. And whether he then thinks about, well, what about all these IT services jobs in India? Why are US companies employing so many people in India? Isn't that bad for the job market in the United States? So I think you should be a little bit nervous around the IT names if Trump wins.
Right. Adrian, just to ask you about China. Now, this is going to be a major factor depending on who wins this election. And we are possibly going to see continued tensions under Kamala Harris as well. But with Donald Trump promising to increase tariffs by at least 10% on products coming in from China, how do you think this trade war will escalate? Because no one will be able to escape the consequences of the trade war. And how will this impact markets worldwide in the months to come?
Trump's policy is particularly clear, but my understanding is the intention is to put tariffs on all imports into the United States. And then he's been making statements on the campaign trail about very, very high tariffs on Chinese goods specifically. So I think the Chinese would be concerned about the macroeconomic impact of a Trump victory, particularly a Trump victory, if he also wins the House and the Senate. which probably means that they become even more focused on their domestic policy. We already have a very constructive policy from the People's Bank of China. The question is, how constructive will fiscal policy be? And I think on balance, if Trump gets in, then you get more of a fiscal stimulus in China as they try and protect their economy from these external shocks. So this could be ironically good for Chinese equities. If you look at the composition of the Chinese equity market, it tends to be very much domestic demand focused companies as opposed to exporters. And so if they get a help from the policy that needs to be put in place to accommodate for a weaker external sector, it might actually be good for their profits. If you combine that with very easy monetary policy, a lot of liquidity going into the financial system to offset some of these deflationary forces, that could be good for Chinese equities. And then you need to read through into the impact on positioning in emerging markets. Last month, we had record outflows from FIIs in India. Partly that was a readjustment towards China. That trend could continue, ironically, under the Trump win, because the Chinese policy actually gets better for what's listed in the stock market.
Absolutely. And we are seeing polling close in some of the key battleground states, such as Wisconsin and Pennsylvania as well. Adrian, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, it's a very interesting day for the United States, for the world, and the markets as well. We'll keep coming back to you for more. So let's see what happens in the next few hours. It will be crucial to see what happens in the 7 key battleground states and whether Kamala Harris can win the blue wall and a few more states to remain safe in this election, as the lead currently for her is very, very narrow and the election remains too close to call.
Right, absolutely too close to call as of now. So we will be keeping an eye out on the important swing states that will be coming out with their numbers and results. But on that note, we're going to step into a very short break. And after the break, we'll get you an update on the global market action and the likely impact on the Indian markets.
You're watching us here on this special edition of Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. We're tracking the outcome of the US elections live, but we have markets to track as well. Overnight, there was decent cues coming in from Wall Street, and that's reflected in the Asian markets as well. This morning, if you look at, the Nikkei, it's opened with a gain of almost 1.5%. The Kospi as well is opened with 1%, almost 0.5% in terms of gains. We're awaiting rates coming in from both the Chinese indices. Importantly, what does it mean for the Indian markets? The Hang Seng is actually down about 1.5%. Remember, it has been a bit of an outperformer over the last 1 month or so. So just keep an eye out on the GIFT Nifty. Yesterday, we saw a late reversal in our markets, almost 150 points off the lows for the Nifty, led by the Nifty Bank itself. And GIFT Nifty currently indicates that the open could be slightly lower. Whether this dip gets bought into or not is something that will be crucial to track, because after having crossed past that 24,000 mark, maybe the 24,000 level itself would be an important support for our markets. It's also a Wednesday, which implies that it is a Nifty Bank weekly options expiry. And yesterday, the Nifty Bank was up 1350 points from the lows. All of today's cues are coming in from the Wall Street overnight, where Wall Street indices ended higher. Stock market staged a bit of a rally, a broad rally before the election results. The S&P 500 gained about 1.2%, bridging the benchmark's 2024 gains to more than 21% itself. The Dow itself climbed about 400 points in the session, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq gained about 1.5%. US investors braced for a contentious US presidential race, which will have big ramifications on the markets and the economy. And another market-moving event that looms this week is not the outcome of the US presidential election, but the outcome of the Federal Reserve rate decision, which will take place on Thursday itself. So let's listen into experts as they talk about the Fed's next move as investors prepare for the US presidential election and a possible interest rate cut from the Federal Reserve later this week.
I do think we should be a little worried about illiquidity if there's a contested or uncertain election outcome. And we all experienced that back in August. We saw what illiquidity could be with a Nikkei that went down the most since October of '87 and a VIX that shot up like March 2020. These were unbelievable moves for something that was very small in the end of a miss on payrolls. So I think we should all be a little nervous about the illiquidity. I think the Fed will be nervous about that too. I don't think they'll try to rattle markets. I don't think they'll do anything extra, but in the discussion or the press conference, I think he'll be cautious about that. 25's a lock. Guidance for December will be the interesting part.
If it isn't that close, if it's decisive either for Harris or Trump, I think there'll be a relief. I mean, that there's less likely to be huge challenges and uncertainty, and just getting that uncertainty behind us, I think, is positive. If there's if there's a Republican sweep of House, Senate, and the presidency, I expect the bond market to be wobbly. I expect them to be worried that Trump would enact all those tax cuts, and I think bond yields would rise. I think a split Congress, whoever wins the presidency, is probably the favorite for the markets.
Okay, and continuing with our coverage on the big US elections, let's go across to CNN News 18's Akanksha Swaroop joining in with us live from Times Square in New York. Akanksha.
Right. All right, I am here in New York, Times Square, as it's famously known that this is a city that never sleeps. The fact of the matter is that New Yorkers may look like a motley bunch. They, in fact, are very fiercely private and protective about their political beliefs. And no matter which way the swing states go, New York City is very confident that they will remain a blue state. And it has been so historically. It's been a Democratic stronghold. In fact, it was back in the year 1984 that New York voted for a Republican president, Ronald Reagan. But ever since, they have remained Democratic for decades on. What are the issues at stake for New Yorkers? It is democracy primarily. They say that democracy is in danger if Donald Trump were to come to power. They believe in everything that Kamala Harris has been talking about, that if she will come to power, she will preserve what United States stands for, which is the people's rights, the right to freedom, and the right to freedom also for the marginalized, the immigrants especially. She talks about reproductive freedom, which has, of course, taken center stage, not just for women in New York, but also for the men. Having said that, it's also economy, which has been talked about by Donald Trump. He's been challenging Kamala Harris and the Biden administration. He's been saying that ever since pandemic struck, the Biden administration has been incompetent, resurrecting the American economy, and that if he were to come to power, he will not just resurrect the economy, he will also end the wars, which are, according to Donald Trump, sucking up all of American taxpayers' money. Over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining in from all the way from Times Square. Meanwhile, in case you are missing this coverage on the television, or if you've missed some of the past coverage, you want to get an in-depth analysis, go on to the CNBCTV18.com website. There is a fair amount of live coverage out there as well. So if you're on the go, the CNBC TV18 website is your friend for live detailed analysis. Just hop on to that and get all the more updates coming in, not just markets, but the US elections, where we're getting you real-time updates. But let's also, get in a comment coming in from our colleague Zaka Jacob, joining us from outside Kamala Harris headquarters at Harvard University. Zaka.
I'm at the Harvard University, where you can hear the music blaring. This is Kamala Harris's alma mater. She's expected to be here at some point in the night. We don't know when exactly. But at the top of every hour, you will have CNN projections Just a couple of minutes ago, you had that on the big screen here, and people were screaming out loud every time CNN said that they were projecting a particular state to go to Kamala Harris. But I think the critical thing is going to be which are the battlegrounds. Right now, for example, CNN, very, very early polling, it is showing Kamala Harris ahead in North Carolina. I don't think that that's how it'll end in the night. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. This is a state that Biden did not win in 2020. A lot of African-American vote in North Carolina. Also badly affected by Hurricane Helen. So which way that state might go is interesting to watch. Georgia, very important. Remember, Biden flipped Georgia 4 years ago, but by a razor-thin margin, by barely 12,000 votes. It is a traditional Republican stronghold state. In fact, the last Democrat to win Georgia was way back in 1992. Bill Clinton won Georgia in 1992. Is Harris running similar numbers as Biden did in 2020? If she is, then that's good news going into the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, because that shows then that she's able to keep the vote at the same level as Biden. And Biden won 6 out of the 7 swing states. So keep an eye out for those numbers in the suburbs of Georgia and the suburbs of North Carolina, because that will portend well as we go later into the night, as we look at Pennsylvania, as we look at Michigan, as we look at Wisconsin. I think the critical factor really is 2 things. One, are young people enthused enough to turn up for her? Like I said, we did see anecdotal evidence of long queues in college towns. In Lay University, for example, in Pennsylvania, there were long queues of young people waiting to vote. Similarly, in the outskirts of Georgia, in the outskirts of Atlanta, we were seeing a lot of young people, young African Americans, waiting in long queues to vote. Does that translate into more battleground wins for Kamala Harris? That's going to be the critical factor. She's got a much more narrow path to 270. If she does not win North Carolina or Georgia, then all her eggs are in the 3 blue wall states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. But if she does manage to surprise everybody, right now she's leading in Ohio, for example. No one quite expects her to win Ohio. Right now she's leading in North Carolina. Would be very, very surprised if she wins North Carolina.
Okay, thank you so much for that update there. But on that note, we'll slip into a short break. But after break, we'll talk to you about how the global markets will impact the cues on the Indian markets. So stay tuned in. Welcome back. You're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. And like we said before, that we will get you prepared for the Indian markets today. We have our research team joining in with us on how the trade setup is looking like, which are the stocks that you should be keeping on your radar today. A very good morning, all of you all. And let me start first with Hormaz. Good morning. And we are going to be setting up for the day today. US elections obviously important, but what are the important cues that we're watching out for the Indian markets?
Good morning, Vineet. Promises to be a very volatile day, as was yesterday as well. But yesterday there was a very sharp reversal from the lows for the Nifty, testing levels of 24,800 yet again, 23,800 on the downside yet again, but closing above the mark of 24,200 by the close of trade. It was the index heavyweights that put their hand up to recover from the lows of the day, be it HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, or even Reliance Industries, all of them contributing to the recovery of the Nifty. But today the big day is all eyes on the outcome from the US presidential elections. Current trend showing Donald Trump in the lead, but a lot of votes yet to be counted, a lot of states yet to be called. So on an eye out on that. And that is why the GIFT Nifty has been extremely volatile this morning. At one point was up 100 points, at one point was even down 70 points, currently also down almost 30 points as we speak. The levels again, the Nifty remains in that range despite that recovery, right? 23,800 to 24,500 on the upside. That is last week's high that needs to be watched out for. Even on the Nifty Bank, 52,320, which is last week's high, it's very close to that. That needs to keep an eye out for, of course, because it's the weekly expiry as well of the Nifty Bank. The handover from Wall Street has been strong, but the weak earnings that continue from the Nifty constituents, specifically from Titan and from Dr. Reddy's, that might act as a dampener if in case there is any further upside. And of course, some earnings from Tata Steel, Power Grid, JSPL, and a lot of other broader market names also lined up for today. But IT is the sector to watch out for from either side of the earnings reactions, and GIFT Nifty is indicating a volatile day ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Hormaz. But let's move on, and Vamakshi is here to tell us which are the stocks that we should be keeping on our radar today. Good morning, Vamakshi.
Well, good morning, Vinny. Let me first start off with Datamatics. The company's net profit declined by 14% to 42 crores, while the revenue saw an uptick of almost 8%. Dr. Reddy's reported net profit of 1,342 crores. This is below what the street was anticipating, and the revenue, however, has come in higher than expectations at 8,016 crores. Titan reported a weak set. Net profit came in at 705 crore, lower as compared to our poll of 990 crores, while revenue too saw came in at 13,215 crores, again lower as compared to our poll. Berger Paints net profit declined by 7.5% out here to 270 odd crores, while the revenue was more or less flat year on year at 2,775 crores. Mankind Pharma saw a sharp jump rather in its net profit, up nearly 30.4%, while the revenue saw an uptick of almost 13.6%. JK Tyre, on the other hand, saw a very sharp fall in its net profit, down nearly 44% to 135 crores, while revenue saw a downtick of almost 7.1%. GAIL reported net profit at 2,672 crores. This is slightly higher than what we were expecting, and revenue at 32,911 crores has come in slightly below our expectations. Oil India net profit saw an uptick of 25%. Has come in at 1,834 crores, while revenue is down nearly 1.6% sequentially. Lastly, let's also focus in on Manappuram Finance. AUM growth out here is not looking that great, because on a year-on-year basis, it is at a 6-quarter low. Gross NPA 2 for the NBFC has surged from 1.96% to 2.43%. So overall, Manappuram not looking so good.
All right, take that point, Vamakshi. Thank you so much for laying out all those stocks which will be in the news. Let's wrap it up with Sudarshan, who joins in with all the cues coming in from the F&O space. Sudarshan, it's Wednesday, Nifty Bank options expiry.
Good morning. So yesterday it was all about the final hour. The last hour surge led by financials helped market close in the green, with Nifty Bank gaining more than 1,300 points from intraday lows. For today, GIFT Nifty tracking US election results is indicating a start with cuts. Talking about flows, FIs remain sellers in the cash market, but on the future side, they have bought shares of more than rupees 800 crore, and at the same time, they have added long contracts of more than 1,300, and also they have added short contracts of more than 3,800. And with this long exposure now stands at more than 26%, around 27%. But on the client side, we continue to see addition of long contracts. Addition is now more than 2.3 lakhs. And with this long exposure for the client side stands at 66.5%. On the option front, 24,300 call has seen addition of more than 15 lakh shares, and premium is almost 102. And on the put side, 24,200 put has seen addition of 8 lakh shares with premium at 175. Support for Nifty is now seen somewhere around 24,100 after last hour's surge, and resistance is now seen at 24,400. Two stocks that might be in focus. First one is SBI, where we have been seeing fresh longs have been building up for the last few days. And on the short side, ABB, there was a fresh short that we have seen, like it was building up yesterday after the con call post the earnings that company had announced.
Okay, Sudarshan, thank you so much for the update there. But on that note, we'll get you more special coverage of the election on the other side of this break, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. You're watching us here on Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. We're continuously covering our we are continuing our coverage of the US elections as the world awaits to see whether the country will elect its first ever female president, or whether former President Donald Trump will make a comeback. The GIFT Nifty, for starters, indicating a 70-point downtick for our markets. All eyes on what takes place in the US. Parikshit is joining us early this morning from Delhi to tell us where things stand. Parikshit.
Well, yes, Donald Trump has won states like Florida, Texas, traditionally all the red states. Kamala Harris winning the traditionally blue states right now. No real surprises there, so to say. We are likely to see polls close in North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan shortly. It'll be very crucial to see what happens there, especially in states like Pennsylvania. Remember, since 1948, no Democrat has won the White House without winning the state of Pennsylvania. In fact, it is said that Wisconsin, Michigan and Pennsylvania have to be won by Kamala Harris if she needs to go on and win the presidency, as Joe Biden had also done previously. This is a neck-to-neck fight. As per the New York Times Needle and Election Tracker, on the basis of the current polls, it is Donald Trump which has the lead in the Electoral College. Remember, it is not the popular vote which decides the candidate in the presidential election. It is the Electoral College, and 270 there is the maximum number, magic number. But currently, these numbers are based on the polling predictions that are coming out, the polls which have already closed. But the battleground states, that is something we are yet to see who they will actually choose as the winner in the US presidential election. Kamala Harris also, we've been seeing her take to Twitter over the last few hours, appealing to people to come out to vote in a big way. She had a conversation with young voters saying that young voters should come out and vote, and she's very grateful to the young voters who hopped on to the phone with her to have a conversation. So this just goes to show how the close this election is, and young voters, undecided voters are very crucial to both camps. Republicans, Donald Trump, Elon Musk have constantly, at the top of every hour, have been asking their voters to come out and vote in a big way. Back to you, Mangalam, but it will be a few more hours till when we hear from the big battleground states as to what's happening there.
A few more hours, and in case there are any changes out there, perhaps could be a little more than those few more hours as well. Thank you so much for that, Parikshit. What we'll do is take a short break, come back on the other side, get you all the cues coming in from the commodities market. Stay tuned. Watching us here on Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18, Manisha Gupta now joins us with all the updates coming in from the commodity space. Manisha, we already saw a move in the dollar index ahead of the outcome of the US elections. What are all the other commodities saying?
So thank you for that, Mangalam. That's exactly what really seems to be weighing on currencies as well. The dollar index, big surge, almost a percentage point at above 104, is really recovering losses from the previous two sessions as the writing is on the wall almost when it comes to the U.S. elections. So we are looking at the strengthening in U.S. dollar way onto the other currencies, especially versus euro and the Japanese yen, and that is weighing onto the commodity markets as well. The crude oil prices will have paused gains. We've seen a bit of a decline on that. Very sharp cuts coming in for base metal prices, where you have copper now trading at a 1% of a decline. Same is the case with silver, 0.5% down onto that one as well. Gold prices seem to be trading quite flat as we are waiting the final numbers from the U.S. presidential elections there. We did see gold hit all-time highs at 27.90 in this month itself. It's trading at 27.40 or 50 thereabouts at this point in time. Well, the markets also are looking at the probability of another rate cut in the month of December after September is done with. So there's various things at play. But overall, the commodity markets haven't taken any out of it in sense of positive. The huge surge that we've seen in the dollar index clearly seems to be weighing onto the markets. So whether it's precious metals, industrial metals, many of the soft commodities as well, and energy as well, everything seems to be down anywhere between 0.5% to 1.5% right now.
Okay, Manisha, thank you so much for the update in the world of commodities. But with that, we're absolutely out of time on this edition of Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Don't go anywhere because we'll get you more of the coverage on the US elections. And up next, we have Bazaar Morning Call.